we would like to introduce you to a man named Banksy. Has anyone heard of Banksy? A few people. Awesome. Oh, yeah. Mike.
All right. So, Banksy is a British graffiti artist who is becoming quite well known. His art has graced the streets of London, Paris, Madrid, and other cities throughout Europe. His art has been in the Americas, Africa, and Asia. Although Banksy has been all over the world, no one really knows who he is. His identity is a mystery. Few people know his name. He's done one interview, and the interviewer has been sworn to secrecy. Some people think his name is Robin Cunningham. Some people think that there's not really one person, but multiple people doing this. There's only one picture we have of him, and it's a picture of him holding up a picture of himself, and his face is blurred out. Banksy is an enigma.
Indeed. Daniel and I would like to show you some of Banksy's work. It tends to be a bit silly and irreverent, but his work often carries a profound message. So here is one. It's a silly one. He has a thing for security cameras. As you can see, it could be about his paranoia, or this could be a warning about Big Brother.
I don't know if you guys can read this one, but it says, "The key to making great art is on composition." And it's funny because composition is all about things being centered, and it's obviously not centered. And I realize it's not funny when you have to explain the joke.
Banksy has a thing for rats. He likes to paint a lot of rats, and we'll get more to that theme later, but here's some good rat art. There's a guy painting over this rat art, and Banksy's got this rat cutting a cord. It's kind of funny.
Cutting the cord. Oh, the rat.
The guy painted on there.
Alright, in his book called War and Peace, Banksy relates a story from his childhood. He says, "My sister threw away loads of my drawings when I was a kid, and when I asked her where they were, she shrugged and said, well, it's not like they're ever going to be hanging in the loop, is it?" Well, here's actually a surveillance picture of Banksy hanging one of his pictures in the loop. There's the actual painting. Isn't stealing if you have to add a painting?
The fascinating thing is that Banksy's art is now being taken quite seriously. For example, Banksy took this rock and drew on it with a Sharpie. He hung it in the British Museum. It is now in their permanent collection. I'm not really sure if they realized that instead of an authentic cave drawing, they got a Sharpie. And people are buying his art for a significant amount of money. For example, Brad Pitt purchased one of his paintings for over $1 million. The next day, Banksy posted some graffiti on his website and said, "What kind of moron would spend that kind of money on my art?" He has this kind of irreverent, self-deprecating humor about himself that is just hilarious.
Banksy has some off-the-wall stuff out there. I get it off the wall. I just got that. But he also has art that takes a darker, more serious path. He seizes the images of violence, alienation, and exploitation and transforms them into something benevolent and even harmless. For example, this is the cover of his book, War and Peace. We have right here. It looks like the man is rioting and about to throw a rock, but on the back of his book, you see the full image, and the man is not throwing a rock, but flowers.
And here's an image from a very violent movie called Pulp Fiction with Samuel L. Jackson and John Travolta. No longer are they shooting guns, but they are shooting bananas.
This next one is on the West Bank wall, separating Israel and Palestine. He braved gunfire to pull this off. But it truly is a prophetic message saying we don't have to live this way, the world can be a beautiful place.
Banksy asks a lot of questions in his art. Here's one. Are we teaching our children to love war and violence?
Alright, the broken window theory. This summarizes what experts call the downfall of society. To paraphrase, the broken window theory states that in a neighborhood such as Bristol, where Banksy does much of his work, a vicious cycle can be started with a single act like breaking a window. People will walk by and, thinking that it is acceptable in this sort of neighborhood, will continue the sequence of disgraceful acts, which such things as graffiti or street art. Passers-by would look at this graffiti and continue the vicious cycle now dubbed as the broken window theory. In my opinion, this is not only ridiculous, but completely devoid of any rational thought. I propose that street art is not evidence of society's downfall, but it is actually the advancement of spirit. It symbolizes the forethought of man and the ability to question authority without actually blindly following it. To quote Banksy's book, people look at Picasso and admire the use of brush strokes. People look at street art and admire the use of a drain pipe to gain access.
This man's art can also be very spiritual and religious. So here we have a boy kneeling and praying after he has painted some graffiti on a wall. The words say, "Forgive us our trespassing." Banksy has a message he wants to voice, but he's not entirely sure about the way that he is doing it. So Banksy prays for forgiveness. He seems to be having an internal struggle with what he is doing.
Here's another rat. This theme actually has sort of a moral significance for Banksy. He wrote in his book, "If you are dirty, insignificant, and unloved, then rats are your ultimate role model." Banksy used the images of rats as a metaphor for those human beings that society pushes to the edges, the ones society finds worthless, and he tries to give them a voice. He puts the rats in front of us to symbolize those human beings that we find uncomfortable to be around. He asks us, are there people in this world that we treat like rats? Banksy throws these images in front of us and reminds us that they too are part of a family and should be treated with love.
Here's another spiritual one. As Christmas is coming, this might have a message for us. Banksy asks, what have we done with the message of Jesus? Have we commercialized it? Do we think the way to fullness of life is through consumerism or through the way of Jesus?
So, who is Banksy? Why does he do it? What inspires this message? Banksy is pretty deliberate in everything he does, so why in the picture he chooses to send out does he wear a cross?
Who knows? But honestly, Daniel, we're all wondering, what on earth does this have to do with the gospel passage this morning?
Well, Adam, I'm glad you asked. You see, Banksy is a mystery. Our gospel passage happens to be a parable, and as Stephanie has been teaching us this year, parables are kind of a mystery, like Banksy. They are mysterious and can be interpreted in multiple ways.
Ooh, Daniel, I like where you're going with this.
I'm not done yet. Hold on. In our study of this parable last week, we discovered that the dominant modern interpretation is that God is the master. This is okay, it makes some sense, up until the point when the master calls this third slave worthless and sends him to the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.
Yeah, that kind of master treats his third slave like a worthless rat. Hardly the image of God I'm comfortable with. You know, I often wonder how the people who first listened to this parable might have understood it.
Well then, two things. First, it doesn't really matter what kind of God you're comfortable with. What matters is the kind of God Jesus presents us with.
That's true, that's true.
And you're right. It's important to think about how those who first heard it might have interpreted the message. The master is interesting because he comes from another place, gives three people some money, and then leaves. Now, according to Jesus, does God come and go like that? The answer is no. For Jesus, God is radically present with us. God doesn't abandon us. God doesn't leave us alone. God is always with us.
That's a very good theological argument that the master isn't God. So who is the master?
Well, we do have some clues that come from first century economics.
Economics. Nice.
Economics. The master comes from somewhere else and gives each slave some talents. Now, back then, a talent wasn't about someone's natural ability. A talent was a large sum of money. One talent was worth 15 years of work. So, the master gives the first slave 5 talents, or 75 years of work. The master gives the second slave 2 talents, or 30 years of work. And he gives the third one 1 talent, or 15 years of work. Now, who in the first century has that kind of money?
I don't know. The Roman Empire?
Exactly. sends them to the place of weeping and gnashing of teeth.
Ouch. So, who are the slaves?
Well, we don't know for sure, but the first slave could easily have been King Herod, the political ruler of Israel. He was good buddies with Rome. Rome gave him a lot of money, and in turn, Herod did what Rome wanted him to do.
Fascinating.
I know, right? The second slave could easily have been the religious elite, the chief priests. They always had to walk a thin line between Rome, who supported them financially, and the people who hated Roman presence because it challenged their way of life. It's hard to tell who the third servant is, but we could say he symbolizes Jesus and his followers. Rome did some good things for the poor. They built roads, for example, not for the poor, but so the Roman military could travel on them easily to conquer more land. Roads were an incidental good that Rome gave to Jesus and his followers. Jesus would be saying in this passage to hide Rome's goods. That is, don't harm Rome, but don't help Rome either.
And you can also see that the third person symbolizes Jesus and his followers, because at the end of Jesus' life, along with Rome, along with Rome's friends, sent him to the cross. Rome did the same thing to most of Jesus' followers. Now, the place where he was crucified was called Golgotha, which means place of the skull. The name matches the darkness of the place. It was a hill outside the city walls of Jerusalem where many were crucified. Now, we have a different way of interpreting the difficult passage at the end of our parable. Rome treated Jesus as a worthless slave and threw him into outer darkness, where there was weeping and gnashing of teeth, which means a place of extreme suffering. But Daniel, what might this mean for us?
Well, then, I think it's important that we all think about that. But for me, it means that God doesn't abandon us, and that God doesn't treat us as worthless slaves or even rats. And God doesn't send us to a place of suffering. But the spirit of Rome is all around us. It is we who send one another to the place of weeping and gnashing of teeth. But Jesus offers another way. And in Jesus' parables, he invites us to choose between the kingdom of Rome, who sends people to outer darkness, and the people of God, which is the way of love, compassion. The kingdom of God says that we're all in this together, rats and all.
Wow, Daniel, that's deep.
Yes, it is.
Well, I think that since Banksy and Jesus are saying that we are all in this together, the only thing left for us to say is